Speaking of sort of B-list villains, not to be offensive to poor Powerplex, but what was it like to introduce him this
Oh,
year? And look, we went from Angstrom, he's still out there.
listen, Powerplex is A minus at best.
Okay, A minus villain Powerplex. This is weirdly the least amounts that we've seen of Nolan as a family man on Invincible thus far, because in season one he's still with Mark, and then in season two there's a little bit of Oliver. This time he's just kind of off on his own in space. What was it like to play around with that in the voice studio? And what was it like to just be Nolan Grayson, the Viltrumite warrior?
First of all, I've loved exploring the fatherhood angle and I'm a Viltrumite, but maybe there's a little humanity sneaking its way into my psyche, into my heart, my soul. Having said that, in season three, to realize that so much of my interaction is with Alan the alien, knowing that it's voiced by Seth Rogen, that was a really nice turn to do something very different and to begin to explore a relationship that maybe takes some unexpected turns.
They're gonna execute you, bro.
They are, yes.
Most people would be more worried about that.
One thing I was struck by when reading the comic and then again watching this season is how adult Mark and Eve's relationship is. It's almost just like they kind of like realize they have a mutual attraction, then just have like a very adult conversation about it. Why do you think they were able to reach that level of maturity at a young age, and what is that like to play with together?
If I'm to be honest, I don't know if Mark is quite there in terms of maturity. I think if anything, Eve and truly Gil's performance of Eve helps create this really wonderful grounded awareness that I think Mark is just kind of lucky to inhabit. He messes up many, many times, and yet she can still see the good in him. And I really do think in this particular moment in their relationship, he's very much extremely lucky.
I also think about the fact that these two, high school to college age characters are literally dealing with life and death, world saving circumstances and stakes. And so I think that that is making them have different kinds of conversations than other people their age, and they're faced with these enormous battles and questions about who they are and who they want to be, and it has such enormous weight for the world, which is unusual. And I also think that Eve, I've never really thought about it until we're just talking now, but I think she has a lot of empathy for him because she is also struggling with being a superhero. I think it's something that she had one relationship with when she was in high school and she was part of a team. And it was really, I think, also about the social connection for her of this group and feeling like she had a place in that. And then now that she's not a part of it anymore, it's like, what does it mean anymore? How does she do it on her own? What should she do? And so I think they're both questioning. Maybe they have different quandaries they're faced with, but they're both questioning.
Rex has kind of come a long way from being the worst to not being the worst.
Yes, I'll take it. The worst.
Progress.
A career of playing the worst people on the show.
But he got better. What do you make of his continued growth this year, and why do you think he leads the charge in leaving Guardians of the Globe?
I love it. I love that inside of this story, we are getting a real coming of age story for Rex Splode, which I think is fantastic, and especially as a reader of the books. When Robert asked me if I wanted to do Rex, I was beyond excited, not just because he's such a great funny side character, such great quips, great just roasting people and busting balls and getting to be that kind of loud, brash guy that I genuinely love playing, but I also knew that the story was going to grow in success to include what's happening in season 3 and beyond and all that stuff. Quite interesting and quite exciting because, it's not just enough to have Rex be, and that's what's so great about Invincible. It's not just enough to have Rex be like a side character who does bits or who's whatever, just a joke machine. That character gets to grow too. Everybody gets to grow. In forward movement, everybody gets to be everybody gets to grow and see different sides of them. So especially I think in season 3, we're going to start seeing a lot of stuff with Rex. They've written such beautiful scenes, such great scenes, still very funny, but really great stuff for him to do that are much more emotional, much more. Rex is, I think, curious about who he is and who he is in the world. And I think that's only just occurred to him.
He's nothing. Just a totally ordinary goddamn nightmare tentacle monster.
I'm glad that you mentioned Alan and Seth Rogen, because I know that this voice acting is probably a fairly lonely pursuit sometimes, and you didn't get to act opposite Seth, probably. But does it help to have that established character in the back of your head? Like, do you know what the response is going to be when you're delivering lines?
Well, I actually had the best of it because the way the schedule worked, most of this season, I was almost always recording after Seth had already recorded. So I got to hear, and they had already, sort of picked their favorite takes of his. So oftentimes, instead of reading with, director, producer, just kind of filling in the lines, I was actually, from my perspective, playing the scenes with Seth. And as we know, Seth brings his own unique style to everything. So it was a real treat.
So I think my favorite episode this year may have been the Cecil backstory, which is episode 2. What went into the decision to present that story, and why now? And do you think it helped explain Cecil's dynamic with Mark?
I think that clarifying Cecil's position of seeing the potential in seemingly bad guys was very important. It's very important to understand like what went into Cecil's mindset and how that was formed as we are solidifying Mark's mindset moving forward. And even though he and Cecil are at conflict, I think you can see some similarities emerging as to how they might be seeing the world.
Also, I think at that point too, like we've seen Mark's backstory, his upbringing, we know a lot more about him. It felt only fair to show you a little bit more about Cecil if they were going to get into the sort of disagreement over things. You want to know where Cecil's coming from too.
And from that episode comes a quote that I feel explains the season very well, and maybe the series, in which somebody tells Cecil, "You can be the good guy or the guy who saves the world. You can't be both." Do you think that's a question? It's fair to say that's a question that every character in Invincible has to face, and it really applies to the series overall?
I mean, it really is kind of a calling card of the series. Simon says all the time that, this is a series about characters that exist in shades of gray. Whether or not, Mark's going to make it through the show without completely becoming a villain remains to be seen. But I think that you've already seen that, lines have to be crossed in order to, do what it is that he's trying to do, to save people, to keep the world safe. You're putting characters in a position where they're making decisions that are very difficult for a single person to make, questions of life or death on massive scales. That's something that weighs on Mark, is going to be weighing on all of these characters. And, they're definitely going to be having to at times get their hands dirty.
I would just add to that. I mean, like in the real world, sometimes Mark's faced with, issues where there is no right answer. There's maybe just two bad ones, and it's like, which one is the least bad? Is that the one he should take? But a decision still has to get made. So we're putting him into those kind of scenarios now to see how he will react there.
I have to get better. I have to be better. Do you understand? Mark, do you?
You can be the good guy or the guy who saves the world. You can't be both. Do you think that makes sense in the world of Invincible? And then how do you feel Mark and Eve would respond to that sentiment?
I feel like Mark would have a difficult time with that statement. I think he's still very young, and maybe he doesn't understand the world from the vantage point that Cecil sees it. In the world of Invincible, I think that is the beauty of the show, is that it's confronting these like difficult situations. There's good intentions, and then there's reality, and then sometimes there's cynicism, and then there's idealism that is necessary too. And so, you're just holding these two truths together and like seeing what happens, and then putting like a young 20-year-old in there. That's just like, it's going to be dramatic.
I think that's why, you're seeing Eve in the treehouse, is because she doesn't know how to reconcile that. She's really haunted by what she did in Chicago, how much worse things could have gone. She thought she was doing the right thing, but she didn't know what she didn't know. And so I think that that's something that she's not come to terms with, and that's why she sort of isolated herself away from everyone. And so I think maybe the journey of the show for her is confronting that, but she's not there yet.
You touched on this a little bit when we were just talking about Rex, but like there are even more kind of subtle and not so subtle indications this year that he's dealing with an immense amount of trauma, particularly from like straight up dying last year.
Yeah.
And then also him kind of telling Ray a bit about his upbringing and being Rex Sloan. How aware are you of kind of that background when you're playing him?
I'll be honest, not too aware. Like I know that story. I know the prequel stories because of the books that I read all those books, the Adam Eve and Rex books that explain their childhood and what happened to them. So I know that story. So I know it as part of Rex's character, but I think inherent to I'll be honest, the way they write the character has that background inside of it, but you can tell Rex is not interested at all in engaging with any of that until essentially the Lizard League fight. After the Lizard League fight is, I think, when Rex starts to be like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? Who am I? Where am I? And I think he becomes a curious person in the world, which is awesome. Awesome to play a character, awesome to sit in the booth for season 3 and not be just doing like, like to have a character who's like, wait a minute, like really not unraveling, but certainly much more curious, certainly expanding his point of view and having like, for the first time, empathy. Empathy for people, and is curious about how Mark feels, or is giving emotional thoughts and advice to Eve, or like he's having much more engaged relationships. He's really a human being.
I would say through 3 seasons, one of my favorite maybe running bits on the show is the fact that Invincible's B and C list villains like Doc Seismic and Elephant have, for lack of a bit, like vaguely left-wing beliefs and modus operandi, for lack of a better word, or woke. Is it fair to say like that's maybe an ironic commentary on so many villains in pop culture having like decent empathetic ideas but terrible execution?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're definitely trying to have some fun, and I think it's really about playing against type. You say woke, but Doc Seismic has like very deep rooted beliefs in equality, and like that's a super weird thing to have a guy be pontificating about while he's threatening people and destroying monuments. It's really just a goal to try and make every single character as interesting as possible. We have a massive cast, and anytime a character shows up in Invincible, we want them to be memorable, and we want them to be, somebody that you're interested in. We want you to be leaning in at all times, no matter how small the character. Even a character like Elephant that just kind of shows up as a gag from time to time. Like, you have a bit of his backstory. You see a bit of what he cares about. That's really important to us.
And then I guess also speaking of sort of B-list villains, not to be offensive to poor Powerplex, but what was it like to introduce him this year? And look, we went from Angstrom, he's still out there.
Listen, Powerplex is A- at best.
Okay, A- villain Powerplex. Why was it important to introduce him this year for this particular arc? And then what gave you confidence that Aaron Paul was the right man for the job?
I mean, Aaron Paul's body of work pretty much speaks for itself. Yeah. When it was clear that there was a possibility that he would take on this role, we were over the moon, and we knew that we were in good hands with that character. I think that this is a season about, the shifting ground under Mark morally, or he's definitely questioning, his stance on things. This is his transition from his late teens into adulthood. This is when you start realizing like what it is you stand for as a person. And so to have a character at a time when Mark is confronting Cecil about, trying to be altruistic, you have a character like Powerplex that's shining a light on, some of the darker aspects of what it is that Mark has done in the past to kind of show some questions as to where it is that he thinks he stands. It's very important to have that rug pulling moment in Mark's evolution as a character.
I sort of hope that you come out of it after watching that episode and be like, Barflex had like 9 out of the 10 things he said he was right about. I think he had a point about a lot of this. Maybe he went too far here or there. Maybe not. But he's not wrong about a lot of the points he brings up with, and he charges Mark with. So that's kind of stuff that's going to be rattling around in Mark's head for the rest of the season and, future seasons past that.
How much of Nolan's kind of fate and arc from the comics are you aware of? Did you want to ask Robert about it, read the comics at all, or is it something that you take each episode as they come?
Yeah, it's definitely the former. I'm one of the few people who didn't even really know the source material when we started this whole endeavor. And, Robert, they've sort of caught us up on the basics of where this world originated and where it went, but also knowing that, we're taking our own journey. And it's one of those, it actually just made me think of Oz back in the day with Tom Fontana, where like every week you get a new script and you go, oh boy, you're turning pages going, oh, what am I going to do, this week? It's kind of similar. It's really fun to not know where you're going to go with this, just like we don't know in real life.
I'll just speak in an open-ended fashion. Like, what are you each most excited for people to see once this season is out? Is there something for season 3 that you've really been looking forward for people to get into?
I'm excited for the fans of the comic to get to see these seminal, pivotal moments be realized. There's some cool-ass fights and some really cool characters that are coming, and I'm excited for that for them.
I'm also just always so impressed by the vocal performances of the cast, whether it's like people who are in one episode or people who are series regulars. I feel like when I read it on the page, it's one thing, and then I have my own imagination of what these characters are going to be like, and then I'm always so surprised and impressed by what people bring to the show. So kudos to the casting department, because this is, I think, one of the coolest casts ever assembled, and I'm taking myself out of that when I say that. But
she should not.
No, but just continued great performances.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Invincible season 3 that nobody has asked you yet?
I know that we haven't revealed the last 2 episodes yet, but I will say that, if you've seen episode 6, I like to think that the last 3 episodes are an emotionally draining trilogy. You kind of get a hint of that with episode 6, but it just kind of keeps going from there.
Thanks for your time. Love talking Invincible. Fun show, fun comic. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alec.
Way to make a fellow superhero feel inadequate. Glad it's not leg day.
Hey, Rex. Yeah, Cecil's got me on a training plan.
Yeah, I can see that.